Hello everyone, welcome to the British History channel and to this latest video. A few weeks ago I was lucky enough to be invited to Gloucester Cathedral to spend time with Rebecca Phillips, the cathedral archivist, and I had access to some incredible artifacts, documents, books that I am able to share with you today. So relax, sit back, enjoy, and thank you for watching. So, Rebecca, thank you for doing this today.
You're very welcome.
Can you just explain quickly what your job here at Gloucester Cathedral is?
Yeah, so I'm archivist here at the cathedral. So I get to look after this wonderful room that we're sitting in, our lovely historic library, and all of the collections that are in here. So that's both our historic archives, the unique records of the cathedral, and our historic book collection. So over 6,000 books on the shelves around us. How many have you got?
Because we are surrounded in this room.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, so yes, oldest items, I'll get to show you one of those in a little while. But yeah, so books going back all the way through to the 1100s, archives going back to the 1390s, and right up to the present day. So I'm still collecting today. It's still a working library as well. So if you come here as a researcher, you get to come and sit at this table with the beautiful view of the cloisters outside.
And are all the books in the collection linked to the cathedral, or do you just have contemporary ones as well? Or?
So in the historic book collection, the library collection, yes, it's all about the cathedral in some way. But kind of the 6,000 books, the kind of books that came to us before 1972, their connection is often the person who owned them. Okay. So the topics might not be connected to the cathedral. So yes, we've got 80 plus Bibles, we've got hundreds of books about religion and theology, because you'd expect that from clergy people. But we've also got all their other interests as well. So we've got books on architecture, we've got books on medicine, on science, we've got a 4th folio Shakespeare that came from one of our bishops. So we can see that he was reading that book at that time. So yeah,
that's amazing. So what have you got for us today?
So I thought I'd bring you kind of ests from the Cathedral Library and Archive collection. So my first one for you is tucked away in this lovely, well, very simple folder here. But the hint is this piece of, effectively it's a piece of wood. So this is a cover of a book. This cover was made in 1500, but the hint is what's on the inside here. So hopefully you can see.
You can see. If that was on a building, we'd call it ghost signing or something.
Yes,
you can see
absolutely, the ghost of text on there. So that is an off-print, so it's kind of stuck, the ink has stuck as something's been attached to it, and what it's stuck from is in this folder. So these are our very oldest items in the collection. So these are 7 pages of Anglo Saxon manuscript from somewhere between 1000 and 1040 AD. So over 1,000 years old.
Wow.
Protected because they were reused in that book, so they were recycled into the binding of a book.
And looking fresh?
Yeah, absolutely. So crisp. 3 really, really crisp ones. And then you get to ones that have got a bit more glue on them, that were nearer to the boards. So I won't lie and say kind of there are some that are slightly dirtier, let's say.
Very legible if you
absolutely.
Can read. What are
very,
they
very
writing
clear.
in?
They are writing in Anglo Saxon.
Okay.
So we've had visitors who've come in and looked when these have been out on display on our tours, who've walked straight up to them as someone who's came from Germany and went, "Oh, is that in High German?" Because it is such a similar language and the script they're using is so similar because the cultures were so connected at that date.
And does that mean, so this is readable to somebody who can even do that?
They were discovered by the Victorians when they decided to repair the binding of the book that came from. So in about 1850, 1860, they took the book apart, found these in there, and translated them. So I can't speak Anglo Saxon either, but thank goodness they translated them. So we know that these are all pages from the Lives of Saints. So it's a particular text called The Life of Saints by Aelfric. And these are non-consecutive pages in it. So we can tell enough to say that they're kind of a page halfway through the life of St Swithin, for example. Well, 3 of these pages are from St Swithin's, but they don't run on back to back. So you get that wonderful EastEnders kind of cliffhanger moment where you get to the bottom of the page turn and go, oh, what happened next? And you have to go and find another copy of Aelfric's Lives of Saints to know what the punchline for that joke is.
That's incredible.
You probably noticed down the edge here, we've got some annotations down there. These are, because it was made part of that later book, this is a tiny little amateur contents list for the book it became part of. So these are place names around Gloucestershire with the pages on which their deeds are in the book that these were part of the binding for.
Right.
So these we refer to as our Anglo Saxon paste downs, because they were literally pasted down onto the inside of the boards.
Wow. So did they use the back of the... when you say they were recycled, what were they recycled for? Paper? Is that what they were
yes,
recycled for?
so recycled as part of the structure of the book.
Oh, wow.
So if I steal one of my little books here for a second, this one's easy to handle. Inside the cover of many books, lots of books, you'll find that just kind of attached to the cover, you've got these bits of either blank or decorative paper that are stuck to the boards. And then blank pages as well that lead you in before you actually start the book. That's what these were used as. So I think probably a monk in 1500 was scraping around for something that looked a little bit attractive. Found these sitting in a workshop, went, oh, those are pretty enough, and probably picked the 7 prettiest pages because he knew they were going to be seen. So there may have been much less kind of well cared for pages that didn't survive as well. But he thought, no, I won't bother with that. Maybe that's why they're not consecutive. Because if you were just taking the next 7 off a pile, you'd expect them to be consecutive.
So that's actually given more of an insight into the entire book that they originally came from?
Yes.
Wow. I'm fascinated by Anglo-Saxon history, so that's amazing. Wow. Wow.
Okay, you're welcome. My next one is what I think of as my prettiest book. So it's this little one here, and I'm going to handle it as little as possible because it's actually made. It's a small Bible. So it's a printed Bible. It's a King James edition, but it's from about 1639. So it's not the first edition or anything like that. The text inside, if I just release the clasp.
So we have 2 metal clasps on embroidered fabric.
Yes. So this is an embroidered Bible. It was particularly fashionable at that date, but you can see just how small the text is in there.
This is printed, tiny text.
We've got a few names in there, so we know that this was owned by women at different times as well. So that's quite nice to have that connection to other women in the past, because so often we don't get seen because we don't get into the records.
This is something I'm coming across, though, with some of the work, or some of the things I'm involved in with Anne Boleyn, and listening to scholars talk, like Kate McCaffrey, that the books are passed down through the female line quite often. So that's lovely.
Yeah, so this one, say it's got a name in it for Margaret Cann. She's written her name in there, so that's probably a sign of ownership of it. But we don't know a date for that. We know it comes to us about 100 years after it's made, so it's had 100 years of life and passing through people's hands. But I love it because of... This is the one book I will judge by its cover.
Yes.
Because it's just so glorious. So yes, it's embroidered. It's got a really kind of rough Hessian first, as a kind of underlying layer. And then the white that you can hopefully just see in there, it would have been white silk. So white silk covering it, then embroidered on the top with colourful strands, so you can just start to see the colour on the flowers on the spine and in the roundel in the middle, the oval. And then everything that's black on here now was silver thread, so it would have absolutely shimmered.
Gorgeous.
Feels very feminine to me, but really wasn't designed to be. It was just designed to be decorative.
Because this sort of book, would someone have acquired the book and then maybe created that cover themselves, or acquired it with the cover?
You could pick either way.
Right.
So some publishers were taking these books to to kind of decorative embroiderers and having them pre-embroider them, so selling them ready-made, or, as with many books at this period, you could buy it kind of with a paper cover from the binder, from the publisher, and then take it to your favourite embroiderer and say, I really want a picture of on the outside, and you could pick your theme. Okay. So it would depend what you chose to do, whether you wanted to have that control. Yes. The thing I think I kind of fascinating as well is, I want to challenge you, what do you think the image on the front is of?
Do you know, when I was sat down, I was going to say it must be King James, because the sort of, this is not, is it? He's got a long white beard. Is that supposed to be a hat or curly hair? We don't know. He almost looks, he's got snow boots on, it looks like.
I'm so glad you're saying he, because for kind of when I first looked at this, I thought she. Oh, look, it's got a dress on, so I think it's she, which isn't right either. And I thought, oh, it's a lady going to market carrying her basket.
Well, do you know what? Do you know what would say? The knees are showing. That's the reason I would say it must be a man.
Absolutely right. It's a man, but that's not a basket. That's a head. This is David holding Goliath's head. So it's a perfectly biblical story, but it's hugely gruesome and so unfeminine.
How funny. As soon as you said it, I was like, oh yes, it is.
You suddenly see that he's holding it by the top knot. He's just gathered all of his long hair.
Ponytail, his moustache, which is quite impressive, and a long beard trailing down.
Yeah. Yes, and what I think that where it looks like David's got a beard, I think it's probably that's where the stitching has been worn off by hands that have held it rather than because he would have been a young man at the date. So, yeah. But it's a very quirky. So we've got the lovely pansies and beautiful flowers down the side, and then lovely gruesome biblical story on the front. But good triumphing over evil at least.
Yeah. Yes.
But yeah, so really kind of quirky, beautiful little item there.
So what have we got next?
These next two are two items from our archives. So these are from our library collection. These are from our archives.
What's the difference?
So archives are unique records made during the life of a person or an organisation.
Okay.
So they are kind of recording your life and work, whether it's a being or an organisation, whereas a library collection are individual items that can be seen in their own instance individually. They might still look exactly the same, so it might still be a written book, but it depends how you look after it and, yes, whether it's got that context.
Okay.
So these can be seen without context. They are interesting and historical in themselves. They will have a wider context, but they've not been kept for that context, whereas these come from our history. So this first one is probably the book that I would be the most distressed if we lost.
This one's the one that is in your, if there's a fire alarm, this one's in your bag.
This is the one that goes in my bag straight away. It's small enough to go in the bag as well, which is really good. But this is our Historia. So this is the monks writing in about 1390, possibly sitting in this room, more likely sitting down in the cloisters and writing the history of their abbey, going back as far as they can remember, definitely before documents. So they are telling their myths, their kind of foundation stories. So this is the book that tells us about our very first abbess and the fact that when we were an Anglo Saxon abbey, we were run by 3 women. This is the book that tells us about Serlo, our first Norman abbot, being given to us by William the Conqueror and arriving. It's the book that tells us about Edward II's burial and the festival around it. It tells us about the coronation of Henry III here. So it is the one book that gives us all of our medieval history.
Wow.
And that's why I would be going, yep, that's coming out. As soon as this room is under threat, that book comes out. And it's had quite a life. So now we see it as two parts. So we've got the smaller part here and then a larger part behind it. When the monks made it, it was all one book. And it's been split by a later custodian. Not best practice now, but we can't undo what's been done in the past. And we don't know when it left the Abbey, but it's small, it's portable. It may have been sent to maybe our daughter cells, because we had 6 other churches and kind of smaller monasteries that were part of us, where we would send our monks. It would be really good sense to send your history, your foundation story, to the places that are a bit more remote, as that kind of almost medieval branding. It's almost kind of, you are part of us because here's our history.
It's the power of the story.
Exactly.
The belonging.
So we don't know quite when it left here, but it's definitely gone before the dissolution. So before the Abbey closes.
Right.
Because it's got a little bit of Welsh in it as well, and we definitely had at least 2 houses over in Wales. Don't know whose hands it goes into after the dissolution, don't know where it went until it appears in a Berlin bookseller's in 1879, when the Bishop of Gloucester gets a letter saying, "We seem to have a book about your abbey." And the bishop went, "Well, it's not my abbey, it's the dean's." So he forwarded the letter on to the dean, and the dean and chapter here said, "We have to have this, we have to buy it back." So £150 and a very kind of urgent letter going, "We're buying it, we'll have it, please, it's ours." It comes home to Gloucester. So it's travelled, it's got all of that wonderful history. It's got, in the larger half at the back, it's also got a herbal, a collection of both description of plants and names of plants that they could find what they needed, but also lots and lots of medical and practical recipes. Unfortunately, very little food. I wish we had food in there because I want to be able to one day do a medieval feast from it, but so far the feast would be one bit of gingerbread, which isn't enough of a feast. But lovely kind of insight into how they lived, because you've got all of those recipes there to tell you kind of what they cared about, what they needed to help with.
Yes.
But very biased history. Because it's the monks writing themselves.
You're allowed to do that.
And very Abbot focused. So they see themselves in terms of eras of abbots. So each section of this is Abbot Hamelin arrives, and then this is what Abbot Hamelin did, and this is what we did whilst Hamelin was here. And then he either dies or moves on, and then the next abbot arrives, and this is what he did, and this is what he led us to do.
So in the beginning of this, is the first monk who's doing this trying to just remember all the things, you know, the myths, and get them down on paper?
Yes.
When does the chronology of what they're writing down begin?
So they start their story in 679 with the very first Anglo Saxon donation of land here to form the first abbey. So they've clearly got an oral history of that, because we're very confident they didn't have any documents sitting around from Osric going, "Here's some land." But it coincides with a particular abbot who seems to have really cared about record keeping. So that's Abbot Froster, and he, in this Historia, they include one little bit where they actually include a poem written by him that summarises the first kind of 300 years until the Normans arrived. So he writes a poem in Latin about the history of the Abbey. So I think this is probably his pet project. I don't know that he wrote any of it himself, but yeah, it feels like he's the driving force. He wants to really show that his Abbey is on the map. So they're writing this in the 1390s.
Okay.
So as they're looking back, the time they're writing about is further away than them writing this book is from us.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Froster also is responsible for the first surviving Chartulary that we still have in the Abbey, or in the Cathedral collection now. And that Chartulary is a book of copied deeds and charters.
Right.
So it's a very kind of administrative, it's record-keeping medieval style. So whereas now kind of lots of people out there in the world will be digitising their documents and having all sorts of electronic document record management systems, a Chartulary is that in a medieval version. So it's, rather than in most of our cartularies, we've got 1,000 deeds in each one.
I mean,
rather
these
than
deeds
have
for
1,000
land
loose deeds.
Yeah.
You copy them all out into one book, and then you keep the book, and it's much, much easier. And say, Froster not only has this produced, he gets 2 cartularies produced as well.
I mean, it's important because an abbey would have lands potentially all over the country.
Yes.
And to have the deed that proves that
you really do own that. And in some abbeys, we don't know if Gloucester was one of these, they even filled in some gaps where they knew they owned it. So kind of, they must have had a deed, so we'll just recreate it.
Westminster Abbey have got one
Absolutely,
of those.
which are just, it's such a human reaction to it. I don't personally believe that it was done with kind of malicious intent or trying to steal money from anyone. It was, or land from anyone. It was more kind of, well, it is ours. We just don't happen to have a document, but the document must have said this, so we'll write it out now. So yes, kind of a lovely kind of glimpse into that.
Is there a significance to the different coloured text?
Yes, it's resource saving. Because the red and the blue mark new paragraphs and new sections. So effectively, each red heading that goes all the way across the text is almost like a new chapter. That's almost always introducing the next abbot. And each red and blue, what looks like backwards P's that are in there. Apparently the proper term for those is pilcrows. I never knew that till I came here. But yes, those pilcrows mark a new paragraph so that you don't have to waste any parchment, because this is written on parchment, so it's really expensive making more parchment. And if you're going to waste half a line to start your next paragraph on a new line, much easier to just drop one little symbol in them and carry on writing.
Because it is continuous text. Yeah. So there's nothing, we would space it out nowadays. Okay, so a question that leads me on from that though. They've been very careful with that, and yet they leave large margins.
So one thing they've used the margins for is contemporary headings. So just here and on this side you can see red headings there. Those are kind of navigation headings. So those are, so as you're flicking through the book, you can quickly find the thing you want to find because you can just read those marginal red headings rather than having to scan that whole block of text, because having taken the choice to do that, very difficult to find your way through it. So they're thinking ahead to do that, but this is also from an era where you wouldn't, if you were studying this book, and actually even if you're studying the Bible or anything else, you didn't have another notebook next to you to write all your research notes in. You keep them in the book itself. So this is coming from a culture where they're expecting you to use the margins as a place for note keeping. So that's leaving space for the future users of this book to be able to add their notes, to be able to say kind of, oh no, and now we've sold this, or oh, and now we've found out that this bit of this person who gave us this actually did this, or this bit that we're talking about here, oh no, it fell down in 1400, so we had to repair it. They never came back and did that to it, which again makes me think this left us, because it wasn't here to be updated, because it stops in 1390 and it just stops. So it doesn't have a kind of the end at the end even.
Right. Oh, so this was put together fairly quickly then?
I think so, yeah. I think they did multiple copies and maybe kind of moved between the Welsh daughter cells, the home, the mother home here, and yeah. Did they think this was ever going to be given as a gift to a benefactor? Probably not. If you were a benefactor, you'd be going, oh, no gold? Where's my bling?
How do I show this off?
Yeah, it's not giftable, and no other abbey would want our history. So it is entirely for our own purposes, but the fact that we know 3 copies have existed and still exist shows that they didn't just want one copy. They needed enough to be able to share it with, for multiple purposes. So, yeah.
That's a fascinating book. Wow.
But you can definitely see why it's the one to save for me.
Yes, I can.
And then this last one is actually kind of from the very start of our cathedral records. So this one is a chapter act book. To anyone who hasn't been around cathedrals much, chapter acts sound like such a weird thing. It's kind of like, oh, we've got a play. No, chapter acts are the deeds of our governing body. So the body that governs cathedrals is a chapter, and the acts of it are the legal decisions that carry weight. So this is our earliest surviving Chapter Act book. We'll see in a while that we were founded in 1541 by Henry VIII, but this one doesn't start until 1616. Okay. So we have a good kind of 60, 70 years where we just don't have any records. The record keeping seems to have been very fluid. Right. Either we've lost them or they were never made because the notes were just kept on scrappy bits of paper and no one kind of knew enough to do the right thing and keep the records. There wasn't an archivist here going kind of, give me that, give it now, give it now. But this book, the reason 1616 is kind of influential date for us in Gloucester is that this records the arrival of William Laud here as Dean. Laud, if you study the Civil War at all, is a name you get very familiar with because he goes on to become Archbishop of Canterbury and he is the Archbishop who is in post as, I'm going to get the names wrong, Charles I is facing execution and Laud is executed as well for being too Catholic. So this is Laud arriving at Gloucester.
And is that his signature?
That is his signature at the bottom of that page. That is his first day in person at the cathedral. And this is the record of his very first meeting that he turns up to. So it's dated January 1616. By modern dating, that would be January 1617. So he's put in post at the end of 1616. He finally turns up to a meeting just at the start of 1617. And the second decision recorded on there, the one at the bottom, is recorded in English. So much of this book is in Latin, but that's in English.
Order for the Communion Fable, does that say?
No. Table.
But yes. Table, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, a communion table.
So, during the Edwardian kind of Reformation, the altar tables were moved down into the body of the churches and turned sideways on so that everyone could gather around it. So it was a communal space to meet. And this is Laud arriving and saying, I don't like that. So he not only orders that the table is to be moved and set, I think they phrase it as altar-wise, so turned sideways. So yes, it's got this long edge facing the congregation, but it's also to be put against a wall so that the priest can't face you as the congregation. And an altar rail is to be made. And the altar rail, I'm hoping I can spot it here, but the altar rail is to be made with small enough gaps so that dogs can't get through.
No one is getting near that table now that William Laud is here.
But that also shows us dogs were roaming the cathedral at this point. So being dog friendly, as we have just become in the last year or two here, is nothing new.
Nothing new.
But back in the day, they had to think about kind of how do we keep dogs away from the special parts. And those altar rails are still in existence. They're still used in the cathedral. They're in the Lady Chapel today. So this entry, whenever someone wants to know kind of when were those altar rails were made, I come back to this entry and go, well, this is still a live record for us. This is still a record of our creations. But yes, Laud is a fascinating character. Say, far too Catholic for the Protestant Puritans that were around. And this is him arriving and very clearly showing that that's his intention at Gloucester. He overlaps here at Gloucester with Miles Smith, who is one of the translators of the King James Bible. Right. So we've got quite a Protestant bishop and quite a Anglo-Catholic dean at the same time. So lots of kind of tension between the two. But yeah, it's just lovely to be able to kind of see that as our starting point, and those chapter acts continue to be made right up to this present day. So the current minutes of chapter meetings come to me and come into the archive as well. So that we've got this record for people in another 400 years' time. They'll be able to look back and see what we were doing as we went into lockdown. They'll be able to look back and see what we were doing as Dean Andrew arrived and see his first arrival and his first chapter meeting.
Are they all printed off now?
They are even in digital form now, so they're not even printed. So I'm having to collect digital records as well, but that's a wonderful part of it.
Yeah. Sorry for the interruption, but just to remind you, subscribe, please, if you haven't already. Click the bell icon, select all, and then you will just get an easy notification when there's a new video. You can also find me on Substack, where I do a newsletter, substack.com/@British History. That's also where the podcast is hosted. You can find me on Instagram. I'm very active on there at British_history_tours. And I do tours. So if you'd like to look at those, go to BritishHistoryTours.com. If you just like the history, you can find me on Patreon, patreon.com/British History for a raft of history lover benefits. Thank you.
So I've got 3 items from our Tudor collections over here. And I thought I'd start with the very end of our Abbey history. We've talked a lot about our Abbey history.
So you get dissolved in
1540. So we're January 1540. Us and Lantony are the 2 last abbeys or monastic houses in Gloucester to be dissolved. I think we're in the last batch nationally as well, because we are one of the wealthier abbeys. So we're a big hitter, so you don't want to close us too early, basically. But this is, we mentioned cartularies. This is a cartulary. So this is the cartulary of our very last Tudor abbot. And the reason why I chose him is because he does like his bling. So this is Abbot Parker's register. So Abbot Parker is here from 1514 when this register starts, and he dies in post as abbot in late 1539. We don't know where he's buried because he was away travelling to the court to go and do all the political things that you need to do as a leader of a major monastic house. He was regularly going up to the court and would be rubbing shoulders with Henry VIII and his courtiers. So he was away at court when he died. And that actually means that we didn't have an abbot at the point when we were dissolved, because they haven't appointed a new abbot before Cromwell's assessors come in and ask for the deed of surrender and the dissolution. So he is our last Tudor abbot. He clearly liked the good life. So not only does he do this, he has these cartularies made with this very, very impressive title page with the most amount of gold that's in the library on it. So this is the most decorated page I've got. So a giant R for registrum, because it is the abbot's register. Okay. And then his coat of arms in the middle with his mitre on the top, because he's a mitred abbot. The coat of arms itself has got arrowheads on it, and very faint on this one, but you can see it much more clearly on Parker's tomb downstairs, a stag going through the middle. That, for me, connects to the fact that Parker, I think Parker had a love of hunting and kind of
got arrows
high life
into his mitre.
Yeah, he's not ashamed of having been a gentleman who was kind of, who did the hunting, shooting, fishing, as well as being a churchman. We know Abbot Parker rebuilt Prinesh as a hunting lodge, and when Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn come to Gloucester on their progress in 1535, they go up and they spend time hunting at Prinesh. They stay somewhere down here around the abbey with the abbot, whether that's in his own house or in one of the guest houses or even in some of the other buildings, we just don't know. And you'll see rooms that we've named after them in a little bit later, but so he's definitely got a connection to both the Tudor royalty and also kind of that high life of Tudor court life, of going out and hunting and that being part of your life.
I imagine that made him quite a popular host for Henry and Anne.
I think so, yes. Although he clearly wasn't completely overwhelmed with support for Anne, because his tomb he has built before he dies, and you get a chance to see it. He's put on his tomb symbols of Catherine of Aragon. So even though he's being chummy and he's welcoming Anne Boleyn as queen, he's also, when it comes to the end, he is putting the symbols of Catherine of Aragon on his tomb, So
incredible. A confident man, I would suggest.
Yes, yes, he's certainly got a lot of bravery and a lot of kind of confidence to just kind of go, nothing awful's going to happen to me. I mean, no one would see it until after he died, so maybe he thought, well, what can they do to me now? Yeah. I'm already.
I wonder whether he still thought at that point there would be a reversal, because of course Catherine of Aragon doesn't die till 1536.
And he dies in 1539, so...
Oh, okay,
so
yes.
he will have known that, but he's still choosing to put her symbols on there, those pomegranates.
Wow, interesting.
So this page, full of kind of decoration, full of kind of glamour, really. The rest of the book gets a lot more kind of simple. They're still doing a bit of decoration, but hardly any colour at all. So they use a lot of kind of Tudor knotwork design, decoration instead, to try and decorate the pages. But as with all cartularies, the main body of the book is just copying out deeds. So as we turn through, we get to just pages and pages of dense text, again with those hugely wide margins, so you can put updates around or notes around. But yes, just copies and copies of deeds, each one numbered by a later historian, so I'm pretty sure this one's got, nearly 1,000 deeds in the one book.
Wow. What kind of time period would that cover?
So this is 1514 till about 1530.
Okay, and 1,000.
Yeah. But that includes all the kind of the small-scale leases as well. So
right.
Kind of,
okay.
If you're leasing a house or a cottage or a bit of land for 2 years, still gets copied into here. So a deed from the king gets the same kind of treatment as a lease for a few years.
Are they all just in chronological order? They just be put in as they come up.
Yeah. Yeah. The next one, probably one of the largest documents in the cathedral archive, relates to our refoundation as a cathedral. So this is from 1541. This is our deed of endowment. So this is one of 3 deeds that helped to set the cathedral up. We have a deed of endowment, we have a foundation deed, and our grant of arms. So this and the grant of the arms are the only 2 that we still have the originals of. For some reason, our foundation deed seems to have left us at some point, and all we've got is a 17th century copy of it.
Another thing to turn up in a Berlin...
Yep, absolutely. If anyone finds it, I want to know. Please let me know. I love this because it has got a bit of decoration. Okay, it's not colour, but it is at least decorated with the knotwork at the top. Got a lovely portrait of Henry VIII up there in the capital H as well. Yes. A very politic portrait, a very kind portrait. So
pretty young and healthy there.
Yes, 1541. I'm pretty sure he's got his leg ulcer by then. He should be a lot more kind of rotund and a lot less boyish.
These are great along the top. Are these... Is that I can't tell from here. Is it imprinted? Or is it...
No, so they are all hand-drawn. So this is all hand-created. So so we've got big dark black lettering across the top that is giving Henry's titles. So it's Henry VIII, by the grace of God, King of England, France.
Defender of the Faith. He's still putting that in there?
He is, yes, yes. And so he's not claiming Scotland and he's not claiming Ireland yet. Because, of course, Henry doesn't. Claims France instead. And Wales doesn't get a mention because that's just assumed to be part of England by this point.
Part of England.
Absolutely. But above that heavy black, you've got a few what I think of as roundels. So you've got one here which is the Order of the Garter. The Onissois qui Malipons. And at the far end, probably the bit that I kind of think, oh, this shows so much kind of legal history as well, is that is actually the symbol of Edward, Prince of Wales. So that is Henry VIII's eldest son, or only son, Edward, and he's got the fleur-de-lis in there as well. So they are already using that fleur-de-lis symbol, and then you've got EP either side, inside a sunburst. And it's the only one up there in a sunburst as well. So I love the fact that little bit of symbology is including Henry's son in the grant he's making in this deed. So it's not just me as Henry, person, it is me as king of all of these places And oh, by the way, here's my successor. He's being included in this as well. So you can't
the
go back on
institution
it.
bigger than the person.
Absolutely. It's actually 2 pages, so there's a much more simple page. It's second page underneath, but we can see it's been used as well. It's been studied. So over time, since it was made, people have come back to it and checked details, because this gives us the estate of land from which we generated income for nearly 300 years after this. So from 1541, when it's given to us, until the 1800s, we had quite a wide estate of land that wasn't dissimilar to the Abbey's land, basically. Right. So it was farms, homesteads. I think we even have a tavern up in London at one stage. This is Henry giving us all of that back. And therefore, if we ever have a dispute about why we own something, we have to come back to this deed. And they clearly have, because down this edge, hopefully you can see, we've got little pointing hands.
Oh, yes. This is where it says we own.
Absolutely. And if you follow across, in the line it's pointing to,
there'll be something underlined.
There will be underlined words.
And here I noticed they've numbered the lines, so that you can go, right, it's number 50, it's line 57, you go, right.
And that is later. That's a later hand that's added those numbers in as well. So again, that is another layer of use, possibly by an antiquarian. The handwriting down there looks awfully similar to the handwriting we saw in that little contents list on the edge of the Anglo-Saxon ones. So I think it could be. We know an antiquarian had access to our medieval documents in the 1700s. This all feels like it's him trying to pull together the history of the Abbey, the history of the cathedral, and being able to kind of, just as I would do now, except I wouldn't write it on the original document. If I was transcribing a document, I get a second copy of it and then I number the lines so that I can make sure I've covered every line, because your eye skips so easily line to line.
Yes, I imagine. And so is this folded up and there would have been a seal?
So the green piece of, well, it's actually braided silk, that supported the Great Seal originally. Is that the original silk? That's the original silk, which is why I'm not handling it, because it is very fragile.
Green and white Tudor colours.
Yes, yes. So the Great Seal itself is about 15 centimetres, 6 inches in diameter. We've got ones for Elizabeth, we've got ones for Charles. We don't have a surviving one for Henry VIII. And probably that's because it's a relatively large seal attached to a very thin cord. So it's very easy for it to snap on that cord or slide off or even be removed deliberately. We don't know that Henry himself ever handled this. We've got a signature here and it's not Henry's, so I think that's probably one of the scribes or the kind of the officers of the court signing in his stead.
That's incredible. Wow.
But real connection back to Henry. My last and quirkiest item is this little wooden box, which I shall hand over to you. Please do. Wow. So this box, when I first arrived here, I was looking around the library and found this little box on one of the sides and thought, what's that about? And on the back, it's got a written inscription, which tells me what it's about, because there's very little on the outside. It's got a few kind of heraldic symbols on there. But it's that little inscription that tells you that inside this casket is a piece of the stake at which Hooper was burnt. So this links to Bishop Hooper dying at the stake here in Gloucester under kind of Queen Mary's reign.
I came past his memorial when, as I came into the cathedral this morning. Yeah. Champion of the Reformation, John Hooper, Bishop of Gloucester, burnt. Was that Mary, under Mary? I can't quite read that. In the city on Saturday, the 9th of February, 1555. My goodness.
And I saw that and thought, oh, does it open? And I've not found a way to open it yet. So unless it's a very clever puzzle box, I don't think it's designed to be openable. No. But as you're holding it, if you gently tilt it from side to side, you might be able to feel that there is actually something in there that is moving. Yes. Which to me gives validity to the fact there is an object in there at least.
It would make sense that people would take some sort of relic from that awful scene.
For me, the contrast of the fact that Hooper was a very Protestant man, a very Protestant bishop. That's why he was burnt. He was anti-relics.
You've got a
and yet they went and collected items, and as the cathedral, kind of his mother church whilst he was here, we have kept a relic of Hooper, the person who would have not liked us having relics.
No. I feel like relics are such a human way of doing things as opposed to...
It is, and I wonder how many other places and other people went and collected pieces of the stake as well. How long did they have to wait after the soldiers left before they felt safe to go and collect them?
Yeah, according, I think, the accounts, thousands of people came to support him in that awful time.
Yes, and there's the very long-lasting myth for us at the cathedral is that the dean and chapter were forced to watch it. And the room in which we think they watched from is now part of our learning centre.
Over the gatehouse.
Yes. So, yes, whether or not they were there in solidarity, or whether it was, if you don't behave, this is what will happen to you too. That lives on in memory as being forced. So kind of maybe, because we don't know who's made this.
This
isn't signed
beautiful
by anyone. So is it possible that actually it's one of the dean and chapter, or it's the dean and chapter commissioning one of their staff to go out and fetch a piece so that we can keep it? Because that would then mean this has stayed here ever since.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for showing me that. Incredible. That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
That's okay.
This has been a magic.
Thank you for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did and you're not yet subscribed to the channel, please do so. It really helps. And also, if you click the bell icon and all, you'll get a notification when there's a new video. But of course, remember, you can go and have a look at all of the videos already on the channel. Click the playlist Historian Interviews and you'll find almost 50 interviews with historians about all sorts of topics that you will enjoy. And you'll also find on the channel virtual tours, mini documentaries, and I'm about to start coming out with a lot more on location interviews, which I think you will enjoy, certainly worth a look at. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your support. Have a great day.